Okay, welcome to the next video. So in this video, we're going to talk about random numbers in programming, specifically how to generate random numbers in Java. So there are many different applications of random numbers in software. Think of a video game you play. I can think of FIFA or an NFL game or something where there's some outside weather, and sometimes that weather is randomized. You don't know what you're going to get when you play a specific game. Even in a driving simulation, you might have some obstacles that appear randomly in the game. And then even outside gaming, just in simulations, you might want to have a large set of random data that perhaps you sort or you count a certain number of items in that data, something like that. Even online gambling is a big thing in software, online poker games, and so you're always going to get a random deal that is dealt to the players, or so you think it's random. It's actually not 100% random, but it's close enough. In programming, we call it a pseudo-random number, meaning it's not exactly random. Pseudo means close enough, kind of random, and it's to the point where a human would not be able to predict what the random number is. If you have ever seen the draw for the Lotto 649, it's often not a computer program that is picking the random numbers from 1 to 49. It's often a live machine that has little ping pong balls that bounce around, and then 6 numbers are selected. So they don't trust the computer basically to come up with these random values. All right, so how do we create random numbers in Java? Well, I'm going to create a double variable called x. And I could just say 4.5, and then I could print it. And so you should know this already. If I print x, then that's going to print 4.5 on the screen. Okay, so we can use this command. We've seen the math class before, and we've used square root and we've used pow before, but there's another command called random. And you just put 2 parentheses at the end, and you don't put anything inside here. So there are no parameters that you put inside the parentheses like we did for square root and pow. You just leave it blank. Okay, and what this does, this gives, so this line generates a pseudo random number, or I'm going to say specifically, it gives us a double value between 0 and 1. So it gives you a small double value between 0 and 1. And specifically, it's 0 inclusive and 1 exclusive. So what this means is this command will generate a pseudo-random number that could be 0, but it won't be 1. So it could be anything up to 1, but not including. So we could possibly get 0, and we will never get a 1. But you can get anything in between 0 and 1. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to run this and show it to you. So if I just give this a run. Okay, so here is the random number that appears, 0.4478. It gives us about 15 decimal places there. Now, if I stop it and run it again, and you don't have to recompile, I can just run it again, and it will give me a different double value. And again, it's just random number between 0 and 1. Okay. Now, it's interesting how the computer actually provides this random number, and it basically starts from the system clock of your computer. So at the time that I run this program, it kind of takes a snapshot of the time of your computer, right down to the millisecond, and it converts it to a number, and then it performs a whole bunch of calculations, modulus, division, multiplication, to kind of crunch it down to a number between 0 and 1. So it's basically, it's next to impossible for anyone to predict what random number is going to appear, but just know that it's not completely random. It's pseudo-random. Okay, so I could run this over and over again, and like I said before, I could get the value 0 right on the dot. That is possible, but I will never ever get 1. Okay, so how could I change this? Let's say let's say I want the roll of a dice. And so I want to simulate the roll of a dice, and I want a random integer between 1 and 6, inclusive, and everything in between. So what we could do is make an int variable. So I'm going to call it dice roll. Actually, to be precise here, a single die is just called a die. So a die roll. So I want to generate a random int between 1 and 6. Okay, so we're going to use math.random again. But remember that if I just did this, this gives me a random double between 0 and 1. So we're a bit far off. So we got some things to do. We first of all need to convert this to an int, and then we have to get it between this range 1 and 6. Okay, so we can use a little trick here. At the very beginning, I can multiply this by 6. Okay, and what that does is it would, here, let me just do some math up here. So 0 inclusive and 1 exclusive. So that's what, if I just have math.random, this gives me a random double between 0 and 1, including 0 and excluding 1. So if I multiply this by 6, so basically I'm generating a random double, and then imagine I multiply by 6. And what that does is this lower region is still 0, because 6 times 0 is 0. But it changes this to a 6. Okay, so right now I have a random number that could be a 0, and the maximum that this could be, the highest this could be, is basically 5.9999999. Okay, it can never be 6, but it could be 5.99999. All right, so we're getting closer to what we want. Then what we're going to do is add 1. And so after we do this calculation, we're going to add 1 to our result. And what that does is it shifts this range up from 1 inclusive up to 7 exclusive. Now, so that means this will give me a random number between 1 and 6.999999999. All right. So the final trick here is just to take this whole thing and cast it to an int. And if you remember from class, this means we're just going to take this double value and trim the decimals. We're going to throw the decimals away. So this will do the trick. This will actually give us a random int between 1 and 6. Let me just re-illustrate one more time. If I take this int off, this gives us a number from 1 to 6.9999, so not exactly 7. And then when I cast this to an int, again, what this does is it trims off the decimal. So the lowest value I could possibly get is a 1, and then imagine all these decimals just being cut off. So that would give you up to 6 inclusive. Okay, there was kind of a lot there that we chatted about. Feel free to rewind and watch that again just to hear it explained. But your question might be, so how do you get this number 6, and how do you get this number 1? Like, how do we know to do that? Well, there's actually a formula here. If you want a random int between A and B inclusive, what we do is we cast to an int, math.random, and so what do we multiply by? How do I get that 6? So it's always going to be B minus A plus 1. That's the multiplier. So, okay, what does this mean here? It means you take the upper bound minus the lower bound and add 1. So if you I didn't finish this down here. Let me just finish this up. Add 1. Okay, so again, if I want a random number between 1 and 6, then this value here is just the higher number minus the lower number plus 1. So 6 minus 1 plus 1 is 6. Okay, and then the this number that we add on to the end, that is simply just the lower bound. So in this case, a. So whatever the lower value of your range, whatever you want it to be, that's what you're going to add to the end here. Okay. So let's first run this just to make sure my die roll works. So instead of printing X, I'm going to print die roll, and let's compile, and we'll run it. And you should get a random int between 1 and 6. Okay, there we go. We got 2. And if I run it again, you get 1. Run it again. 5. Okay, so there is a chance to get a repeat. 4. No repeats yet, but it's equally likely. All right, so there's another 1. Yeah, so I could run this over and over again, and it keeps just giving me random numbers between 1 and 6. So I could get a 1, I could get a 6, or any integer in between. All right, we'll finish with just one more practice. So what if I want to generate a random int between, let's just say 10 and 25. Okay, so for some reason I want a random int between 10 and 25 inclusive. So that means a 10 I want to appear sometimes, and a 25 I want to appear, and then anything in between. Okay, so I'll make a new variable. I'll just call it z. So it's going to be math.random. That's step 1. So that gives us a random double between 0 and 1. And then I need to multiply by something. So what do I multiply by? It's going to be the upper bound minus the lower bound plus 1. So 25 minus 10 plus 1 is going to be 16. So that's my multiplier. And then at the end, I'm going to always add the lower bound of my range. So in this example, it's 10. And then you just put that whole thing in parentheses and cast it to an int, which means you're just trimming off the decimals, and put a semicolon at the end, and there you go. So z will be a variable that stores a random int between 10 and 25, and then I can do whatever I want with that variable. Print it, use it in an if statement, whatever I want. Okay, so that's it for this lesson, and we'll do some practice in class. Thanks for watching.